Welcome back. Now, history is back on the agenda, not just because of the gaps in David Cameron's knowledge. October marks the beginning of Black History Month, or season, that period when we're supposed to recognise our African past and mobilise for our future. Well, one of the highlights this year is the visit of the prominent African-American scholar, Dr. Quizzy, who's just started a week-long tour through Britain. Welcome to the programme.
Honoured to be here.
And I believe you're struggling with our temperatures at the moment. You've just flown in
Yes,
from
I'm
Dallas,
coming
Texas.
out of triple-digit weather, 100 degrees. So, you know, to me, I'm freezing here in London.
Don't worry, we'll surround you.
So I have a jacket on and everything.
We're going to surround you with African love, aren't we, people? Yes.
Yeah, I haven't seen the sun. It peeked out one day. I said, "Oh, the sun."
Sir, Baba, you're not going to see it. Anyway, let's start off with this tour because you opened it last night, I believe, in South London, yes?
Yes, I did. Mm-hmm.
And how did that go?
Well, it went great. The community came out, and I'm honored to be here for Black History Month here in October. You know, in the States, it's in February.
That's right.
And this is not my first time here. This is, I believe, my fourth time for the Pan-African Congress movement.
Yes.
So it's always an honor to come to the community and talk about African history. And when we look at in the States with Black History Month, Carter G. Woodson, Dr. Carter G. Woodson, who actually started Black History Week that led into Black History Month.
That was in, what, 1926? Something around
yes,
that time?
Right. And he referred to it the fact that if you have American history, you can't really deal with history until you deal with African history, because African history is world history. Without African people, you wouldn't even have humanity.
Yeah.
With all the anthropological research, African people are the first people on the planet Earth, and dealing with that fallopian tube, and I'm speaking of the fallopian tube of the longest river in the world, and that's the Nile.
That's right.
And they're that early migrations that started up out of Africa and migrated around the world. But I think the most powerful quote that he said, that if a people have no history, if they have no worthwhile tradition, it becomes a negligible factor in the thought of the world that stands and been exterminated.
Right.
So when you don't have a culture, when the people have no direction, in the name of this Sankofa, if you have no past or you don't recognize your past, how can you understand the present and to move into the future? So
can you give us the broad themes of this particular tour? Because you're going to 5 or 6 English cities, aren't you? I think you're going to Nottingham, Birmingham, Luton, Manchester and Leeds. Is that right?
Yes, Birmingham, Manchester, Leeds, yes, quite a few of them on the road. So it's a little rugged.
Okay, but what about those themes, though? Because sometimes there are concerns about Black History Month or season here that we're not quite learning the things we need to learn to understand who we are and to focus on the present and the future in this country.
Well, first of all, we don't have an institution to start at a very early age where it should start, and we should have institutions and schools controlled and owned and operated by African people. That's number one. I think what we need to know is dealing with the culture that we see in the Western world, that without African history, you would not have this in the Western world. Every African child should know great African leaders, great African historians, and those who have a great African genius. When we think of, and go back, say 5,000 years ago to Imhotep, in fact, you look like Imhotep.
Do I?
Yes, you do.
Well, thank you very much.
I have a nice piece of Imhotep. He has a shaved head and everything. But he built the world's first stone building, the Step Pyramid, in an area called Saqqara. Okay, the Step Pyramid that led into pyramid building of the true pyramids. And we start with this time period because this is African high culture. And of course, with the Western racism, everything has been denied African culture of the Nile Valley. And this would go back to a man named Hegel. Hegel was a German philosopher who said that Egypt was not a part of Africa, as though the Nile started here in London or somewhere else. But the zenith of civilization ended up in Egypt. To understand Egypt, you got to understand Inner Africa. Everything that you see on the temples of Egypt is coming out of the interior of Africa. So 32 years of my life has been involved in doing field research, not only in Egypt, the Sudan, Ethiopia, and also traveling to West Africa.
That's right, these study tours. And I'm very interested in this because, of course, you work with people who are interested and they say, look, I want to go down to Egypt and I want to learn something. So tell us how these tours work.
Well, it's an annual trip that we do every summer, and fortunately we have a lot of brothers and sisters coming here from England who join us. Fortunately, they're on this side, so they don't have to go through the jet lag that we go through. So that's a good thing. And it's a tour that my wife and I, we do annually. It's a 15-day educational tour, And we cover from all the way from Cairo all the way down to the border of Egypt and Sudan in the area of Abu Simbel, which you have one of the greatest colossals of Ramesu. So this is a complete educational program. One is very well equipped. You get our books, so you're familiar with the African builders of civilization.
Yep.
And all of this.
So, for example, right now,
you got the picture. I didn't see you had the pictures here. Okay. Well, here it looks like that's the temple of Dandara.
Yeah.
Okay, that you're looking at there. We have our groups there, and Dandara is a temple that goes back to the time of the Third Dynasty, and that's known as the Old Kingdom, and we're talking about that's almost 5,000 years ago. And of course, there are other kings who built onto the temple, coming all the way down to the Ptolemaic period. And the Ptolemaic period were not indigenous Egyptians, okay, or the proper name would be Cometians.
Right.
The Ptolemies were pretty much usurpers of the throne of ancient Egypt that led into the Greco-Roman period that came into Egypt at that time. And so a lot of the Greeks got the artisans to build onto already existing temples.
I'm just thinking about people watching this at home, and they'll be fascinated by the way you're describing this. Imagine if the three of us went on a study tour next year. What would the intention be? Because I mean, I imagine I'll be in awe at the magnificence of the buildings that I've seen on television and in books since I was 3, 4, 5 years old. I suspect you two are the same. But I'm just wondering about what I would really be getting from a 15-day tour with you, who's been studying this for such a long time, and how it was supposed to make me feel about myself afterwards.
Right. Well, first, it's going to be a great inspiration, and we hope that you would have that. And like any education or one would take classes on anything, is to inspire, to motivate, to have knowledge of, in this case, knowledge of self. On all the temples, there's a symbol called the burdette. You may be familiar with it. It's a sun disk wing.
Yeah.
But that's a symbol of know thyself. So we hope that one would have a deep knowledge of self. When we talk about self, we're talking about a cultural self, a people's self. To open up a genetic library that we refer to an ancestral genetic library that we all have. But most of it is locked up through self-hatred. And a lot of this is done through the term of ma'afa, or the time of slavery.
Yeah.
In terms of make a slave, you take away people's culture, you take away people's way of life. So many Africans today pretty much function out of in an alien world, so to say, and in some cases have a denial of self because of this negativity towards our African culture.
I see colleagues are nodding here. Erica, what say you? Because when we talk about know thyself, that's the kind of thing you tell women, especially in your empowerment courses.
Well, it's actually how I've lived my life. I've hated myself for most of my childhood and my adult life, simply because I didn't know myself. I wasn't educated, and I wanted to be what I wasn't. So when you were saying what you said, I was able to relate with that. And I actually use makeup in the beauty industry going back to the Egyptian times, which is where makeup started. A lot of people don't know that.
Yeah.
So I'd be very interested to come on one of your tours just to educate myself, to give the knowledge to others too within the beauty world.
And what about you, Chris? Because your background is both English and West African, Sierra Leone, is that right?
Yeah, that's right.
I mean, do you say to yourself, okay, well, I'm a Sierra Leonean, I'm in the west of Africa, I can't claim to have any purchase on the pyramids, I didn't build the pyramids, but I mean, as an African globally, I can take some pride in them.
I think that you can look at it on several levels, and I think the first one is key, that's just been said, which is that the Nile is the source of all humanity.
Yeah.
And that source of the Nile is in Uganda, and it flows out of Lake Victoria, and it came out, and it doesn't matter what you believe or anything in terms of those, that happens to be a truth. And when you look at it at that level, then you begin to know yourself. And then from there you can ask yourself, you know, which part of humanity am I, and what has happened to me as part of humanity. Then you look at the bridges that exist between those different types of humanity, and you say, well, I'm a bit black, I'm a bit white,
Yeah.
where's the bridge?
Yeah.
And then help people walk across it.
This is the key thing.
So not just know thyself, but also love thy neighbour.
That's
With
right.
their neighbour too.
Yes,
And Dr.
right.
Quizzy, you work very closely with your wife, Merera.
Well, I
And-
feel like I'm unbalanced, especially what you just mentioned in terms
Yeah.
of makeup. She actually deals with, in fact, her lecture last night was on the cultural destruction.
Oh
of
yes, don't
African
you look
fashion.
fine together, the two of you?
Yes.
Wow.
You look fine.
Yeah, that's us in the day.
Back in the day.
Right, and so she has a lecture dealing with the cultural destruction of African fashion. So her lecture was very impressive last night, and people were very receptive to it, as well as other lectures. But in order, and relating to what you were saying earlier, it's just like the Western culture. Even though we're in England, but they recognize what Greco-Roman history. That's part of European history.
Yeah.
So again, that's tied to European history. So the same thing with Egypt. Egypt represents all of Africa. This is the zenith of civilization. So
when you look at the president of Egypt today, Mohamed Morsi, okay, you see an Arab man. Of course, he may or may not see himself as an African, but a lot of people in the sub-Saharan region will probably see it as cut off. It's something different. And a lot of Africans globally.
Well, the Arabs came in 641 AD.
That's right,
They
so
came in.
yeah.
They came in as mercenaries to fight the Byzantine Romans. And of course, when a mercenary comes in, and you can't defend yourself, of course, this is how Egypt became a Muslim country.
Yeah.
Prior to that was Coptic, and then of course there were many other invasions down through the millenniums. But you still have many black people in the southern part of Egypt. And many times when we look at CNN, we think that the people look a certain way, as you see in Cairo, okay, which people look like a lot of people in Cairo because of the many invasions that came in. As I said, the Greeks, the Romans, the Persians, the Syrians before them, and on and on and on, coming even down to the French, the British, and so forth. So you have all these different people coming into that area. But when you go into the southern region, you have more of the people who are more melanated, okay? Nubians are in the south. Just like if you come to the United States, you're not going to see the indigenous people that once lived in America referred to as Indians. You have to go way out west because that's where they were pushed at. So equally, this is what you see in Egypt.
And when you come to this country each time, and you say it's the fourth time, and there are some people who are desperately keen on learning much more about their history, not just during October, but around the year. But let me hazard a guess, perhaps the vast majority of us are just getting by, living in austerity Britain, and haven't necessarily focused on our African history going back 5,000 years, or even the last 50 years. How concerned are you about that, reaching those people, because many of them are beyond reach?
Well, we come with a visual PowerPoint lecture, and images shape our reality. Unfortunately, most of our reality is shaped by the tell lie vision. So we tried to bring a historical memory with the information and be very interactive, to bring that inspiration and that motivation to want to know, to want to read, to want to go after that book. So that's our position, okay, in terms of bringing this information to brothers and sisters. Like last night, we could hardly get out of there last night.
You got mobbed.
It was, you know, and people came up to us, you know, I never really cared, I didn't want to know about this, but you've brought a whole new light, a whole new way of thinking about our African history. So this is the importance of bringing it in this manner, not just talking about it, but showing it, and showing the figures, and showing the faces, and even paralleling some of the people in the audience when I showed Neferkara, Pepe II of the Old Kingdom, okay? And here's a young man looking just like him right in the front of the row, okay? See, that's a great inspiration to see that, because most of our history, or most of what we know, is coming from the Western world. We know about the Greco-Roman history, we know about the British history, we know, you know, and the heroes and sheroes are coming out of a Eurocentric reality, not an African reality. So this is a reality that predates the Western world when it was never even in existence.
Tremendous. Well, thank you very much indeed. You're most welcome to come back to the UK.
Honored to be here.
A fifth time.
Fifth time.
Tremendous. Dr. Aslam
Great.
Qureshi, thank you very much. We'll be putting details of your tour up on the website and also on screen right now. Okay?
Great. Thank you very much.
Very much. Time for another quick break. When we come back, we'll be getting up close and personal with Britain's African Emperor.